I'm just going to do a few thoughts about what might happen this year. There's obviously, in terms of actually follows on from the where that video chat just went, but also some other stuff that has probably kind of slid under the radar a little bit, given everything else that's been going on in the news. Apparently, there's been a pandemic, so I've been The big thing that changed last year is HMRC have now become a secondary preferential creditor. So prior to any, so this is from insolvencies that commence from that date going forward. So prior to that, since 2003, so the last pretty much 20 years, they've been an unsecured creditor, so they're ranked with everybody else. But now they are secondary preferential, and what that means is that they have jumped up the queue. It's quite nice if you're the government, you can just sort of rewrite the law to where you get paid in the order of priority. And this is going to have just rattle through it. It applies to all of those taxes, pretty much anything where the company has acted as the collector, because apparently the government sees that the company's kept taxes that have been paid to it, but then not paid over. Now, what this is going to have is going to have a couple of impacts. It's going to have an impact on other unsecured creditors receiving monies out of insolvencies, because let's be honest, businesses that struggle, the first person they stop paying is the taxman, because you don't need them to carry on trading, in terms of you don't need them, you need to pay your other suppliers and your employees, otherwise they won't turn up to work or you won't get raw materials in, for example. So they're always the first person that gets stopped paying. The other impact this is going to have, this now means that HMRC will rank above creditors that have got security over the company. So this is typically going to be banks. So banks are now going to be less likely or willing to lend, because they now know that they're going to get paid after the HMRC. And the other point about HMRC is obviously we're sort of fully aware that they've agreed to sort of deferrals of VAT and other debts, and they've not really been chasing for debt that's been due, because the government's put in bans about winding up petitions, and they're trying to seem to be supporting. But at some point that is going to end, and HMRC are going to start pursuing for debt. Now, are they going to be forgiving and understanding, or are they going to revert back to the 2019 version where it's a checklist process, the debt's owed, and you haven't paid it, so they'll just move on to the next stage in recovery proceedings? I suspect they will go back to the 2019 version because it costs too much to train staff to be empathetic. Just a little bit about 2020. Quite a lot of people suspect that insolvency practitioners have been pretty busy, but so 2020 corporate insolvencies were down 27% on 2019, and personal insolvencies were down 9%. Now, this is massively due to the government support schemes. They have stopped, as I said, HMRC have stopped issuing winding up petitions against companies. HMRC account for pretty much 80% of all winding up petitions anyway. They've also introduced schemes like furlough and bounce back loans, which have enabled companies that probably may have fallen over or failed regardless of the pandemic, and they've enabled them to kind of keep going. And at some point, as we've spoken about, as James spoke about, these bounce back loans are going to have to start being repaid, as well as the VAT. So things are going to change. So that's just, at some point it is expected, and all the analysts suggest that insolvency stats are going to rise in 2021. The big question is how much. So as I've just said, yeah, the loans and the deferrals are due. The restrictions on pursuing debt is going to end, and also the government is going to withdraw the support. The furlough scheme, well, it's obviously scheduled to end at the end of April. Whether that gets postponed again, we'll have to see. The next question is going to be, if there are going to be tax rises, there's going to have to be at some point to repay the large amount of debt that the country is now in, and is that going to have an impact on the profitability of companies? Is corporation tax going to be one that looks to get raised? What's going to happen with business rates? But then also, any tax that hits the the amount that someone takes home in their pocket, then that obviously impacts on the amount that they can then go and spend, and therefore has a knock-on effect on companies. Brexit, we haven't, we've all, it's been rumbling away in the last month that there's been kind of issues with sort of paperwork and support and not support and kind of access to goods and whatever. I doubt we've seen the last of that kind of feeding through. I think it's kind of been hidden a little bit by the pandemic, and that's going to play an issue. And as I've spoken about, the access to finance, if given that banks are now going to be less willing to lend, they're either going to want more security, which you might not be willing to give in terms of personal guarantees. They may obviously refuse to lend at all, or they may look to be lending but at higher interest rates, which may then put people off getting bank finance. As Gavin spoke about in his 45 seconds, the MVLs, this is a solvent liquidation, trading will have ceased. It's just so these are good for tax planning. What you may know as entrepreneurs relief, but the government actually decided to change the name last year to business asset disposal relief. They really didn't think of that acronym, because that's a bad relief there. So this is when people are looking to exit their business. As Gavin mentioned, this is a tax that may look to change. Entrepreneurs relief may disappear in its entirety. The underlying rate of capital gains tax may be raised, and so we may be seeing a rise down to a few reasons. IR35. This is a thing for personal service companies. It was due. These were new rules that were due to come in on the 6th of April last year. The government postponed them until the 6th of April this year. I think when they postponed them in March last year, they didn't think that we'd still be dealing with what we're dealing with now. So is that still going to happen, or are they going to postpone those? We're also the baby boomer generation. They are coming up to retirement, and typically a lot of this generation set up businesses with a view to providing for their family. But they've now looked around and discovered that their two children, say, that they thought might follow them into the family business, are off working in social media or something else, and they haven't followed them into the business, and they need an exit route from the business, or quite simply, they've people are thinking, well, I was thinking I was coming up to retirement, but actually, I don't want to carry on dealing with what COVID has had an impact on what their business is doing. And they're looking for an exit. So I think we may well see a rise in MVLs this year. And the last thing is a new piece of law, which is technically called the Debt Respite. It's about 20 words long, the actual title of this piece of legislation, but it's going to be known as a breathing space. Now, what this is it's designed for individuals that are in problem debt who seek professional advice, and it's basically aimed at giving them a legal protection for 60 days, which is going to become known as the breathing space. During that period, they will seek advice from a debt professional, and the creditors will not be able to charge interest and other charges or take action to recover the historic debt. But if it's, say, like a credit card, they won't be able to chase for the arrears, but they will be able to ask for the next minimum payments that would be due in that 60 days. It's basically giving individuals space to actually look at the best solution for them. The regulations, and this is a fantastic piece of legislation, it's also going to provide for what's going to be known as a mental health crisis moratorium. So anyone that is receiving mental health treatment, either they can apply, or their doctor, carer, other professional can apply on their behalf for one of these mental health crisis moratoriums. And that moratorium lasts until 30 days after they leave treatment. And they won't be able to, so basically creditors won't be able to profit by charging interest and charges in a period when they're clearly not capable of dealing with their finances. This isn't a procedure to write off debts. It's simply a procedure to put a pause, a break on things, to enable these people to seek the most appropriate solution for them. And the other thing is this: the debt advice provider that they go and see isn't allowed to charge a fee for this work. This isn't going to be something that's going to be done by insolvency practitioners. This will be something that will be done by the likes of Step Change and other debt charities. But despite the fact that this law has been approved, it doesn't start until the 4th of May. For I suspect to give the creditors a bit of time to get their systems in place. But really, I think there's a lot of people out there that could probably do with this earlier than May. But that's when it's going to happen. And that is me rattled through some brief thoughts on 2021.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jamie. Has anybody got any questions for Jamie?
A quick one.
Yep.
The breathing space, Jamie, is that bringing us a bit more in line with what they do in the States, where I think we saw one of the big rappers a couple of years back, he applied for insolvency, but just so he could rearrange his finances.
Yeah, there just seems to be a bit of a trend in insolvency at the minute. We seem to look at what the states do, copy the idea and try and improve on it. Yeah, there's a lot more kind of forgiveness in American insolvency. There's a lot less, but there's also a lot less writing off procedures in American insolvency. Not that I've studied it in any massive detail, but yeah, that's the general idea. I think this is probably a long overdue thing. I mean, the one issue that is still going to have is you've still got to get that person to get that advice. That's still going to be the problem. But the mental health one is a really good idea, and because that can be done by not just the individual. And I suspect in the majority of cases it won't be done by the individual because they won't be capable of sort of dealing with their affairs.
Could be really open to abuse, that one though, couldn't it? I suppose.
That's what I was thinking.
Also, what's the how do they define the end of treatment?
Yeah.
So this is all these are conditions. So these are there's a whole load of conditions that that are laid out in the legislation, but these aren't just someone who being diagnosed with depression by your doctor. That's not enough. We're kind of towards the end of people that are kind of have been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. It's that extreme, but there needs to be an application with there needs to be effectively the medical professional needs to have certified that one of the conditions has been met. So that should get rid of the abuses, hopefully. But
Brilliant. Mark?
Just building on that, Jamie, we see a lot in employment situations where somebody does something stupid, or they get themselves in a very difficult position, or they're struggling with performance, and then as soon as the company tries to address it, they go off with stress and try to use that as a way of avoiding the issue. So I think it does provide a bit of a get out of jail free card, these kind of things, because it does get abused, for sure.
yeah, I mean, hopefully I would say hopefully it won't be, but as you say, pretty much every scheme's open to abuse by people that are determined enough to do it. But I think hopefully it'll help the genuine need.